In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, audience, to this special episode of American Black and White. Tonight, we've got a lot that we're going to cover. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to frame this discussion tonight where we're going deep into the U.S. government, its shutdowns, healthcare battles, political parties, and the real effects on everyday Americans. We're going to emphasize the goal with civic education, clarity, and connecting policy to people's lives. And we're going to set the tone where we're going to balance the legacy driven and focus on impact rather than partisan spin. So, first, let me start out with we're going to start where I'm going to talk about the government shutdown. And we know the impact that has had on an enormous amount of people. And it was cross sectional, but it hit people as a whole. And so I just want you to know, as we go through this, I want you to know that I've got a lot of notes here that I've written down as we go through this, because I want to make sure that this is about as clear and as concise as it could possibly be. So we know that when we talk about the government shutdown, a government shutdown means that federal funding lapses, agencies close, workers are furloughed. And so that's just for workers from, within the government. And these people are no longer to do their everyday jobs with their everyday lives, because that means that the people that are sent home are the people that's considered non-essential personnel. And so when they go home, they're going home because, they are the people that they have to sit on the sidelines until funding for the government actually comes back. But I'm going to take you guys through this historical context first before we get here, because I want to tell you guys, remember the last shutdowns that we've had. We had one in 95 and 96, and this was caused by the budget clash between President Bill Clinton, which was a Democrat, and the Republican-controlled Congress. And the one in 2013 was caused by House Republicans tying government funding to delaying the funding Obamacare. That's healthcare. That is the Senate and President Obama, Democrats refused to give in to that hostage takeover. Then we had the one in 2018 and 2019, which was caused by then President Donald Trump and his demand for border wall funding. And Senate Republicans backed him, but Democrats who had just taken the House opposed. So again, the hostage takeover did not happen, and it was not given into. This last government shutdown that we had, this was where the occupant of the White House basically wanted to get rid of health care for those that are under the Affordable Health Care Act / Obamacare. And he wanted to make sure that these people, that they let the subsidies actually lapse. And so we're still not here at December 31st yet, and they have the government open, but the thing is, that is what we all got to watch, because if they do not extend those subsidies or make it add to it as of December 31st, then that means that the Affordable Health Care Act will be dead. And if it's dead, then that means that if you thought you had health care, oh man, you're in for a rude awakening. So that's just that's the textual part of this when we talk about the government shutdown. So when we talk about this historical context, what we're talking about is that when instead of actually just funding the government and staging a budget, which is what they're supposed to do on an annual basis, they're not doing that. And so I'm here again. Let me start. Let me say this as well before I get further into this. I want to make sure that you guys know that I am definitely not coming from a partisan perspective, because I'm not a Republican and I am not a Democrat. I'm strictly independent, but I think this is what we, the people, need to understand going forward, especially when we talk about the things that are going to present the best the best possibilities of us having better lives going forward. And so when we talk about that last this last shutdown, this last shutdown boiled down to not only was it the healthcare, but we also had them wanting to shut down the SNAP program. Now, we all know that for people that are on SNAP, they're there for a reason. Now, these programs were set up to make sure that we have this safety net for each and every individual that needs that support from the government. Because at some point or another, I think each and every last one of us have contributed to the funding of the government and what the government has going for what it's supposed to do in order to take care of we the people. Now, when we talk about this situation with the Affordable Health Care Act, because this is the main reason why Democrats were not going to agree to actually come to the table and let these subsidies expire on December 31st, is because they know that if they did that, then what we will be looking at is we will be looking at DEFCON 3. And when I say that, we have so many people here in the country that are suffering from so many different chronic illnesses, and knowing that the Affordable Health Care Act has brought those payments way down, which means that people can actually go and see doctors and have themselves taken care of. And so what we have to understand is, why is it that on the conservative side, the Republican side, that they felt like it was so it was so great to let those subsidies expire and to let people that were on healthcare, to kick all these millions of people off of healthcare. Now, for those that need to understand, when the Affordable Health Care Act was passed back in 2010, what you got to think about is that there were things that was already said that there was some things that need to be done for improvements. Now, they were saying, they've been saying this for the last 15 years, that they have something better, but have never yet to present that. So if they don't have something to replace that, what sense does it make to cut the Affordable Health Care Act totally, completely off, and have people, and just kick millions and millions, over 50, 60, 75 million people kicked off health care, when there's nothing to replace it? Because what's going to happen is that people that don't have health care, especially if the Affordable Health Care Act is shut down, then that means that you're looking at paying really, I mean, premiums are already rising, but you're looking at paying, um, 500s, thousands of dollars just to go and see a doctor. Now, the thing that makes this even crazier is that there was no healthcare professionals, I think, that actually stood that came forward. I mean, at least I don't remember seeing any. That could have been, but I don't see any of them that actually came forward and mentioned that this was crazy and that we needed the Affordable Health Care Act. But besides that, we're talking about the SNAP program as well. Now, if people can't go see doctors and if people cannot eat, now does that mean that we have uh, a high number when it comes to the homeless rates around the country? But we also have issues to where where people that are already on fixed incomes, regardless of the case, that need that assistance. I mean, they wanted to take that away. And so in that context, I know that there are probably plenty of Republicans and plenty of Democrats out there that are listening to this, but they both have got to do what's necessary in order to take care of people. Because now I can say I agreed with the fact of not actually caving into that, except for those 8 Democratic senators in these last couple of weeks that actually did the cave in and voted with the Republicans in the Senate to actually um, agree to what they had in place when there was nothing that could actually that was actually going to be comfortable enough to say that the Affordable Health Care Act was even still around. And so right now that's still up in the air and people don't know where healthcare stands. So it's still a very possibility that all of us are going to suffer from this, that's not in the top 1%. So what these causes, this is what we talk about, a political gridlock. A political gridlock is a situation where opposing political parties or factions are unable to compromise or pass legislation. And so this matters because gridlock often happens when different parties control different branches of government. Like, let's say, if you've got the Democratic Party being in the presidency, and let's say the Democratic Party controlled the Senate, but the Republicans control the House. So this is what we're talking about, gridlock. But in this case, the Republicans have both the presidency, the Senate, and the House. And we have a government shutdown, which they are refusing to take the blame for because they're the ones that's in control. So if they're in control, then we, the people, need to hold them responsible for what has happened. But they want to shift that blame to the other side and say that it's the other side's fault, but it's the other side's fault because the other side will not allow them to kick people off of health care. Now, like I said, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, but I really think that those of you that consider yourselves Republicans, especially if you're not in the top 1%, I think you need to strongly, strongly look at where your party stands. Because if they're willing to kick you off of healthcare, they're willing to get rid of a safety net, then that's a problem. That's a problem that's going to affect you. It might affect you like tomorrow, but it's going to affect you here in these next couple of months or so. So none of us want that to happen, but if nobody is actually taking the time to hold these people accountable, then I don't know how we actually get through all of this regardless. So let me give you an example. In 2013, Republicans in the House demanded changes to Obamacare, while Democrats in the Senate and President Obama refused, leading to a shutdown because neither side would budge. Now, the definition of this is conflicts. This is budget disagreements. Now, conflicts over how federal money should be allocated in the annual budget. Now, when you have that kind of conflict, and you knowing that you have to fund the health care for the American citizens at this time because the Affordable Health Care Act is a law. So they refuse, the Democrats refuse. And so in all of that, because there was nothing else to be done, they finally eventually had to give in to that. Now, what I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if it's Republican or if it's Democrat. If you guys can actually go there to DC when you're sent there by the people that voted you to these seats, then the people need to strongly look at the people in which they're supporting, because you don't send people there to play around with your life, because this is playing around with everybody's life. Everybody's life. And so this matters because at that time, the U.S. government had to pass the spending bill to keep agencies funded. So in that case, when they went and they did the vote, they passed the funding, and the CR was just continued. CR means continued resolution. So with them continuing that CR, that means that nothing really was done, but everything was just status quo. And so they do it for like 6 months, they do it for a year, but it's just sitting there, and it's just at this point. So a better example of this is the 1995-96 Republicans wanted deep spending cuts while President Clinton opposed them. Okay, and the disagreement over that was what programs to fund and at what levels caused the two shutdowns. Now, at this point, I can remember this because I was a veteran at that time. And what happened is when they shut the government down, we basically couldn't even work. We could not even work. And so it's like just sitting there and you just eyes glued to the news, and you just sitting there and you listening, and you're hoping that something's going to happen because people got families to take care of. Now, in this case, this caused Republicans an enormous amount of seats. It cost them an enormous amount of seats because what they were trying to do is they were trying to, they were trying to make cuts to where they wanted federal workers, they wanted to make the federal workforce smaller. They wanted to not fund particular programs like social programs as usual, for the people. So this was like a really major debacle because it happened twice. It happened twice. It was at the end of 95, and then it happened again in 96. And so the one in 95, they just did the CR for like, I think, a month or two, which brought us into the year of 96. And with that, this is when they shut down again before quickly ending that. And so, when we talk about, funding the government, we're talking about the debt ceiling, and they should have this budget set already. But when you talk about the debt ceiling, the debt ceiling is a legal limit on how much the U.S. government can borrow to pay its existing obligations. Okay, in this matter, because raising the debt ceiling doesn't authorize new spending, it allows the government to pay the bills already owed, but debates arise because some lawmakers use the vote as leverage to demand spending cuts or policy changes. Now, this is trying to do another form of work that you're not supposed to do, where you need to keep the government going because America owes bills. It has to pay bills. And that's what that's about. But if you don't want to pay bills, but you want to keep spending money, I don't think that makes sense. And it don't make sense because, again, the people that are considered non-essential personnel is the one that has to go home on that furlough those are the people that's really suffering. Because if you're like senior management, that's in any part of the United States government, you are considered essential. So you're there in the office. So you're going to get paid. But what about the little man? And so the people that have been hurt so far by what has just transpired, I mean, this is still not over because the CR that they agreed to is only for 3 months. And so what that means is we're in the month of November. So we're looking at possibly in some part of January that this is going to come up again. And so what's going to happen then, especially if they don't continue the subsidies for the Affordable Health Care Act so people can still have health care. So that has to be signed into law as well. And so this is what we're waiting for. And so let me give you an example of this about the debt ceiling. In 2011, a major debt ceiling standoff nearly led to default, which it actually did because America's credit rating was downgraded by Moody's because it was not paying its bills, but it had borrowed so much money. And so while not a shutdown, it showed how debt ceiling fights can destabilize government operations and markets. So what we learned from that is that when America's credit rating is downgraded and it says that you're not paying bills, but you went out and you borrowed all this money, that's just like now. We're in trillions of dollars worth of debt because tax breaks for the top 1% have been made permanent. So if they've been made permanent and they're not going to be paying taxes, but we're like $5 trillion in debt, how is that debt going to be paid? Where is that party that put us in this situation? When are they going to be held accountable? That's under this occupier that's here in the White House. Tried this when he was first in the White House, when he occupied the seat then, and he's occupying this seat now, and all he's doing is spending money. And they say they're worried about the debt that their children will have to pay, but they're the ones that's running up the debt. Now, I can tell you this, and again, I'm not a Democrat, but I can honestly tell you that when Joe Biden had to clean up that mess after the occupier was there the first time and things were coming to a much better situation, I can say that, things were moving back towards equilibrium. And so it takes time, which means that he actually would have needed, just like President Obama after Bush, was going to have 2 terms in order to clean up the mess. And it seems like Democrats are cleaning up the mess that the Republicans are making, but the Republicans are throwing the blame on the Democrats. But the Democrats are not actually throwing the same blame back when they should, when it seems like they're actually in the same shell game. So it's kind of convoluted and we don't know where this is going, but this is where all of us as American citizens need to make sure we hold these people accountable. Because I can tell you going forward that when we talk about economics, this is not where we need to be. Because in 3 months, when this comes back up again, what's the CR going to look like? Or are they going to have a CR? Are we going to go back into a deep plunging situation that's going to get even worse? Because it's not going to get better for us, because the tariffs that have been imposed, we the people, the American people, are paying for the tariffs. We're paying for them. So, I mean, again, it's a shell game, but it's crazy. But this is how they interconnect. Okay, gridlock is the broader political condition. The budget disagreements are the specific fights over spending priorities. and the debt ceiling debates are fights over borrowing authority. So together they create the perfect storm for shutdowns when no compromise is reached, meaning that they're all contributing. That's Republicans and Democrats. They're all contributing to the destruction of the country and what the people have to build and have to continue to pay for. So I think it's time that we look at these people and realize one thing. We can't keep sending the same people back to Washington, D.C. that's been there for 40 and 50 years. Why are we making their lives comfortable to make our lives uncomfortable? We've got to do our due diligence, and we have to get those people out. All of them. All of them. Especially those 8 Democrats that actually cross lines. That right there lets you know that these people are not loyal. They're not people that you could consider reliable. They're not even people that you could consider that you could even go and say you need to talk to them when things are harsh. Because if there's no loyalty to what you guys said you were going to do in that original bid, but then 8 of you actually crossed that line, I want to know why people still voting for those people. You can't possibly say that these people are the best people for the job. You can't possibly say that. So, just in short, as we go into that part of about this about the government shutdown. The government shutdown is not to help pretty much anyone that's in the regular economy, any of us that's under that 1%. It's not here to help us, and it's not going to help us. We have to help ourselves, and we have to do our own due diligence. So I think it's time that we find ways that we start coalescing with amongst ourselves in all of our many cities and states. And we need to start coming up with our own plan as to how we get folk in there and we get folk out of there. So the immediate impact of this whole thing is the federal workers were unpaid. During the shutdown, many federal employees are either furloughed, temporarily laid off, or required to work without pay until funding is restored. The impact of this is the workers miss paychecks, creating financial stress for families. Essential services like airport security, law enforcement, and military operations continue, but employees may not be compensated until after the shutdown ends. The morale and retention in federal agencies can suffer. So we're already finding out the situation that transpired this last time when it came to the air traffic controllers. The air traffic controllers, these people were out trying to find other jobs in order to make ends meet. They're out there Ubering and door dashing and all this other good stuff because they can't get no paycheck. And they can't get no paycheck, but the senators and the congressmen are getting paid. The president and vice president are getting paid. All of the president's cabinet is getting paid. But these folk are not getting paid. And we talk about fairness. We talk about what's right. I want to know if anybody can understand and say, hey, what's right about this? When you can always know that there's a lot of wrong with that. There's a whole lot that's wrong with that. So when we talk about that, we was talking about the delays in the food assistance program, the SNAP program. When they did what they did for SNAP, the SNAP program faced funding uncertainty and risky delays in benefits for low-income families. These families were all over the place, not knowing what they were going to do, how they were going to eat, and what was going to be next. But the occupier in the White House, the people in the Senate and the House refused to fund those programs so those people could eat. Now, despite what was going on, a lot of states took into their own hands as to what they were going to do for their people. They actually went into their budgets and they started funding the program, which I would think that probably they would have done that initially, but this is what they did because nobody wanted hungry, homeless people being just all over their city when you could always do better and you can prevent that. But these folk that's in this administration, that was not their goal at all. That was not their goal. So the big picture is shutdowns don't just affect Washington. They ripple outward. The workers lose income, communities lose service, vulnerable populations face delays in critical support, and the economy takes a hit from lost productivity and consumer spending. So just when you think about that and you know what was right and what was wrong, I mean, it's got to be kind of hard to say that you can find something right about shutting down the government and not letting people eat or not wanting to pay people because you're at a gridlock because you want to kick people off of healthcare because you don't want to fund the SNAP program. I think it's enough when you've already guaranteed, finalized forever those tax cuts for the top 1%. That's a permanent tax cut that has been signed into law by Republican senators and House people. They made that tax cut permanent. And I hear no outrage about that. I don't hear no outrage about that, but people are actually outraged that people that need SNAP should not have SNAP. You've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. So if we're in that kind of country, then that means that these folk that are actually doing their free for all, that's living free willy-nilly, that are whatever they're doing, undercutting and under the table money or laundering, whatever they're doing, and they don't have to pay money to the government. Why are we upset with that? But we're not upset with the tax cut that's been made permanent for the top 1%. It's the same thing, just a different level. Just a different level. But, you know, that's here nor there because, I mean, I can have my opinion. Everybody else has got their opinion. But I honestly don't think that there's no individual out there that would agree that we should have a permanent tax cut for the top 1% in this country that they don't have to pay taxes. And so just so you know how that's trickling down to you, or the prices are going up and they're expanding services to do pretty much any and everything that they want. Their whole purpose is to shut down small business and to have you do one thing. They have to get your money, don't care how you get it. They have to get your money. So again, this is something that we all need to think about. We all need to be thinking about this because I can tell you this, in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, however you want to look at it, for the time that this person has been sitting in that seat, this man has done a destruction to this democracy already at a 10 to 15 year period right now. If this continues, of course there won't be a democracy, but if it's stopped, and if it's not stopped soon, there's no telling how long it may take to get this country back to where it was. Now, I'm actually expecting that there's going to be a downgrade to the credit rating again. And the reason why I say that is because it's like that same thing that they tried to pull in 2010. And that is, you know, they want to hold up the government because they want to get what they want to get. which is something that's going to affect each and every individual in an adverse way. But the strange part about all this is that there are people that are still voting for this. They voted for that. They voted for that. But for us that did not vote for that, we have to suffer right along with those folks. There's no separatism. It's all one. It's all one. But we didn't vote for this, but this is what we got. So now, how do we get out of this? So I'm going to tell you about the long-term effects, because this is what we need to really understand. The economic slowdown, and what that means is a reduction in overall economic activity caused by disruptions in government operations. And so the impact of that is federal workers missing paychecks and reduced consumer spending, which slows local economies, delays in loans, contracts, and permits, stall business growth and investments. Tourism and service industries suffer when national parks, museums, and public services are closed. Even after a shutdown ends, recovery can take months as agencies catch up on backlog and businesses to rebuild confidence. So that's still telling you right there already, if you're already behind, the time is just of the essence. So we're looking at, this was over 30 days, I think it is what it was. So if it was over a month's time frame, that 1 month is going to put all federal agencies back by at least 120 days, which is 4 months. That's how far back it's going to go, because there's no work being done. And so, and just to think about it, remember the essential personnel, the directors and managers and so forth that were allowed to come into the office, they should have been working, but they ain't working. They're sitting there and they're just holding a seat until you get back, federal worker bee. When the worker bees get back, the worker bees got to catch up. And so if you don't catch up, then that's your problem, because they're still holding your standards against you. Now, I'm speaking that from experience, because that's true. That is true. That is absolutely true. Being an investigator, being out the time that we was out, which was over a 30-day period, the standards still ran and they still counted, which means that all the cases I had was backed by that number of days. And I had to apply for an extension, which I got the extension, but I got the extension with a scolding. Now they're sitting in the office not doing anything when they could pick up all these cases and they can work them just like everybody else. But you see how that trickles down? That trickle-down effect. That trickle-down effect means that as long as you're considered a worker bee, you have to work. But they don't consider themselves worker bees. So if you're sitting there and you're dishing out the assignments, then that's all you have to worry about. So, but what this does is this actually causes the public not to trust the government. It causes the public not to trust politicians. It causes the people to just totally just be upset, overwhelmed, and not knowing exactly why this is happening and why we have to do this on a continuum. Now, I want you to know that they've had this before, but I can honestly say I think that it was either the first Obama administration in 2008 when he got in, or maybe it was like on the end of that Bush's second term, that they had this thing where they started doing the CR where they never passed the budget. And so just so you understand, the reason why they don't pass a budget is because they want to have the ability to just spend money. They want to just spend the money regardless of the case. It does not matter if you're Republican or Democrat. They want to just spend money. And that's all they're doing. They're spending money, but the debt that they're racking up comes down to the American people, where we're the ones that's got to actually pay it. We're the ones that got to actually pay it. But they've got these advocates that's running over around this country and on all these different platforms that are continuously spreading the same falsities to make people want to buy into this, and people are actually buying into this because they are listening to the sweet tones of the voices of these people that are telling them the misinformation. And that's a horrible thing when you think about it. It's horrible, but it's true. It's horrible, but it's true. So they didn't think about the strain on the families that depend on the federal government, because families who rely on federal assistance, that is food aid, housing support, health care, small business loans, face uncertainty and hardship when programs are delayed or disrupted. And the long-term impact for that is they have missed or delayed benefits, can push vulnerable families deeper into poverty. Housing insecurity rises when rental assistance or FHA loans are stalled. Nutrition programs like SNAP face funding risk, affecting children in low-income households. Stress and instability can compound over time, making recovery harder even after the program resumes. The large picture to this is that the economic slowdown affects the nation's financial health. The loss of trust undermines democracy and governance, and family strain hits the most vulnerable, widening inequality. So, if that's the case, and we know that this is going to be the everlasting effect, I mean, who are these people that are being affected more than others? Who are these people? Are they even looking at that, or is that something that just happens and that those people are just basically just like a casualty? They're a casualty of war. So there's nothing that can happen for them. They just have to take what's given to them, and that's all there is to it. So the civic takeaway to this is that shutdowns aren't abstract. They hit wallets, communities, and confidence in democracy in a way that no one would ever have thought could happen, but it has. And it's getting worse, because I'm about to tell you guys now about healthcare, because once you understand primarily that when it comes to healthcare, healthcare is a right. I mean, it's a right. And you know, it's another one of those things that as you think about it, somebody's got to wonder, why is it that these people do not want me to have healthcare? Why? It sounds like they'd rather have you die. Healthcare is considered a right because it is tied to human dignity, equality, and the basic right to life. It ensures that everyone, regardless of income or status, can access medical care. Treating healthcare as a privilege means only those who can afford it receive care, leaving vulnerable populations at risk of preventable suffering and death. So I want you to think about that. If you're on the Republican side and you are a Republican and you voted Republican, you're saying healthcare is a privilege. It is a privilege, but everybody's tax dollars that go into it only supports you because you can afford it. Yeah, that's right. That means if you can afford it, then yes, I'm privileged to have health care. Yeah. I guess that's the way it's supposed to be, right? Yeah. I guess for those folk that think like that, that's what they believe, but you can't have it both ways. You can't be uh, uh, a socialist, uh, democratic government that's heading towards communism, you can't have it those both ways. You can't have it that way. It's got to be one or the other, because trying to toe the line and trying to decide who you want to suffer and why you want them to suffer is not beneficial at all. So let me tell you about the healthcare as a human right. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights article, Human Rights, which is Article 25, states that everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for health and well-being, including medical care, which is Medicare. So that's a right. The World Health Organization affirms that access to timely, acceptable, and affordable health care is essential for achieving global health equity. The Moral Foundation, denying care based on ability to pay, undermines human dignity and equality. Healthcare protects life, which is the most fundamental right. So, you guys, just go and check out this nonprofit site. It's I as in India, S as in Sam, H as in hell, R as in Ray.org. That's ISHR.org. Check out this website and see what it tells you about healthcare being a right. Check that out, because what you're going to find out is that as we're talking about healthcare being what it is, which is a right, that right means that everybody has the opportunity and have the access to getting the healthcare that they need and they want. But they're trying to take that away. They want to take healthcare away. And so this is why it's not a privilege. Privilege definition is a benefit reserved for certain groups, often based on wealth, status, or circumstances. Healthcare reality. If healthcare were a privilege, millions would be excluded simply because they cannot afford treatment. This leads to preventable deaths, untreated illnesses, and systemic inequality. And remember that last part, systemic inequality, because that's where we're going with this. And the ethical argument is most societies agree we have a moral responsibility to prevent suffering when possible. Healthcare is not a luxury, it is essential to survival. Essential. But when you let these folk tell you that you don't deserve health care, you don't deserve the social programs that's been around since the 1950s, then what do you have? Because they go hand in hand. They're definitely mutually exclusive. They work together. So our government is telling us that, one, we don't need that. We don't have a right to it. And only the people that they feel need to have this are the ones that should be getting it, because they can afford it. Now, there's plenty of folk that went out there and they voted against their interests, and they voted with the occupier that's in the White House, who has been trying to kill the Affordable Health Care Act since the last time he sat in that seat. He didn't have the opportunity then, but he's up to December 31st of this year having that opportunity to close that door permanently. That's right, December 31st. That's when the subsidies expire. We don't have a midterm election until November. We have a CR until January, February of next year. Now, how do you think that's going to work? How do you think that's going to work? We got to get out. We got to start holding these people accountable because, I mean, that ain't right for nobody. I mean, there's not one individual on the face of this earth in this country that needs to be thinking and worried about something like that. This is why you don't take things for granted. And when you start taking things for granted like this, especially when it comes to life and death situations, this is where we find ourselves. Now, the practical and social reasons behind healthcare is first, I'm going to tell you about public health protection. Universal healthcare protects communities through vaccinations, disease control, and preventive care. Economic benefits, preventive care reduces emergency costs, medical debt, and keeps people healthier and more productive. The social stability is guaranteeing healthcare strengthens trust in institutions and reduces inequality. Now, when we say reduces inequality, that's a lot to work for and that's a lot to hope for. That's a whole lot to hope for. But when you just think about it, how is this going to actually benefit each and every individual out there? It's going to affect you where you need to actually march yourself to the poll, wherever city and state you're in. And I'm telling you, y'all need to vote these people out. Because if you don't vote them out, there's no telling what's going to happen. I'm sorry, but nobody needs to be sitting in one seat for 40 years. For 40 years, what the hell were they doing that they couldn't get a job accomplished? If they couldn't get it accomplished then, what makes you think they're going to get it accomplished now? They're doing the bidding of that top 1% that's paying them to sit in the seat that you put them in. That's what they're doing. So this debate is this is the right perspective. Healthcare is a shared responsibility. Society should bear some burden to ensure everyone receives care. The privileged perspective is that some argue healthcare requires resources and should be earned or purchased. But this view risks leaving the poor, marginalized, and vulnerable without life-saving treatment. So, for those of you that just heard that, do you believe healthcare is a right or do you believe it's a privilege? Let me know. Send me one of them comments right there, right here while you're watching the show. Send me a comment. Send me a comment because I will definitely read it on the air because we need to know the difference between the two and why this is so important. This is very important. So to summarize this, healthcare as a right protects life, dignity, and equality. Healthcare as a privilege creates inequality, denies care to the poor, and undermines public health. Global consciousness, international law, ethics, and health organizations affirm healthcare is a human right, not a privilege. So, what are we going to do about that? Are we going to make that fuss that we should make to let the people know that supposed quote unquote that are representing us, if we're not going to their offices, if we're not sending them those emails to let them know that this is not what you like and you're going to make sure that you vote them out? This is what you should be doing. That's your civic engagement. That's your civic right. You can do that because the place where they're occupying, you're paying for it. The paper that they're using, the computers that they're using, you're paying for it. I'm talking about you, Mr. and Mrs. America. You're paying for it. So you have that right. You more than have that right. You need to go to each and every last one of these meetings whenever they decide to stop cowarding down and showing up, and go to one of those meetings that they have and express your feelings like you should. Because if you don't express those feelings and you're constantly looking at the folk on TV that are there at the meetings and you're not there. What's the problem? What is the problem? It's time to get on it. This is urgency. This should be done just like yesterday, because we all have our responsibilities of what we need to do for this country and for mankind. We all do. And so if we're not doing our obligations, how do we expect things to happen? How do we expect things to work? You can't. And so, different countries, they frame healthcare differently. The US still debates whether it's a right or a privilege, while Canada and the UK treat it as a right through universal systems. This contrast shows how values, politics, and social priorities shape access to care. Why do you think so many people, when this person reoccupied the White House, why do you think so many people left and went to Canada and the UK? The healthcare. The healthcare. The healthcare is universal. Universal. They pay little to nothing for healthcare and get prescriptions at the bare minimum. While here in America, only here in America, can you have hundreds of dollars for copays if you have no insurance. Hundreds of dollars. And then for prescription drugs, that even though they just negotiated prices, prescription drugs at one point was like absolutely at an all-time high, depending upon your chronic illness, and you have to pay all that money. They're trying to put us back at that point. They're trying to put us back at that point. I need you all to remember this date, December 31st. December 31st, 2025 is the day that the subsidies for the Affordable Health Care Act disintegrate. If they don't pass a bill on that date or by that date, healthcare will seem to cease as we know it. And then we will say healthcare here in America is definitely a privilege. If you can afford it, you can definitely go to the doctor. You can't afford it, you just die. That's crazy, but it's true. That's crazy, but it's true. So let me tell you guys a little bit about how that works between the U.S., Canada, and the U.K. So the U.S. Is still believing that healthcare is a privilege. Canada has a universal system that's publicly funded. It's publicly funded healthcare, is what it is. The UK has, the same system is what they have, and it's publicly funded. Here in America, we're paying public monies, but we're paying reduced prices still at this point. At this point, it's reduced price. But why can't we have a universal healthcare system? Are we possibly afraid of the people that get this care will live that much longer, and you don't want them to live that much longer? I mean, is that one of the questions? Was that one of the debates? Is it that you don't want everyone to have health care, but you want particular people, segments of people to have health care, but not others? Could that be the debate? I will tell you this. If we don't do what we need to do, then we're all going to suffer going to get medical attention. So I got a little table here, and in this table actually breaks this down for us. When it says it frames the U.S. as right versus privilege, but Canada and the UK as healthcare as a right. The type here in America, we have a mixed program. Canada has a universal public system, and the UK has a NHS tax funded healthcare system. So the debate is access versus cost in the US, efficiency and wait times in Canada, and resource strain but not universality in the UK. So these people are getting much better health care in this country, even though they're like a free leading country as well. But supposedly, quote unquote, America being the richest country, but they're actually making the people struggle and pay the health care. Uh, what is that like? So, when we talk about key debates, there's several debates that people have had on this, but the big picture overall is the U.S. is still divided. Healthcare seems by some as a market commodity, by others as a human right. Canada and the UK treat healthcare as rights. Um, they embed it into national identity and policy and global consciousness under international law, and the World Health Organization affirms that healthcare is a fundamental right and not a privilege. So we're still looking at, man, this is going to be crazy because this is like, um, I don't know, this is just like, this is a lot. So let me tell you guys, the way they define the universal healthcare system is a system where the government guarantees healthcare access for all citizens, usually funded through taxes. So that is primarily what this was supposed to be, but not at the way that it's actually being done. And do you guys remember when they tried to appeal the Affordable Health Care Act and it was at the Supreme Court? And so the reason that this case was won for the Affordable Health Care Act is because the way that is structured and the way it's set up, you can't take you couldn't actually just cut that off like that because it's set up as a tax. And so if it's set up as a tax, which means it should go more towards a universal system, which they're not doing, but it's set up as a tax. And so, every time you do your taxes, you have to present that 1095 to your tax preparer because you have to put that in the software or in your return that you have health care. So you track it and you have the resource to prove that you have it. But the full use of the system, no. And when I say full use of the system, I'm talking about from a universal perspective because we're only paying a reduced payment. Um, so that's why it's called affordable. But at any rate, if we actually went more towards universal, it would be that much better. So now we're facing the rising cost of prescription drugs because that's gone up, and the access, to disparities, which is race, income, and geography. Now, this is touchy for a lot of folk, but This is true. When we talk about race, minority communities often face higher rates of chronic illness and lower access to quality care. Again, minority communities face higher rates of chronic illness and lower access to quality care. Structural racism and unequal distribution of resources contribute to those disparities. From an income perspective, low income families are less likely to afford insurance or out of pocket costs. Medical debt disproportionately affects poor households. Geography. Rural areas often lack hospitals, specialists, and emergency services. Urban areas may have more facilities but face overcrowding and long wait times. So the debate advocates argue healthcare systems must address inequities through targeted programs and universal access. Critics of government intervention argues local solutions and private initiatives can better address disparities. So what we're talking about is if we're going to do what we need to do, that is the people of the United States, don't care what state you're in, and if you have health care and now you're probably facing one way or the other, are you going to have it or you're not? As of January 1st, that's a major question. And so what that means is that each and every individual needs to go out to their representatives and they need to talk to those representatives and let them know that you need your health care, you want your health care, and your health care is your right. People are not demanding that that right is always instilled. So we've got to do something about this because they're actually, if there's no health care, then what do you think is going to happen when it comes down to, uh, just your everyday living? So let me tell you what some of these impacts are, because I think this is something else that's going to pretty much stick in your head here. Is medical debt occurs when individuals cannot afford healthcare costs, including hospital bills, prescription drugs, and insurance deductions. This matters because in the US, medical debt is one of the top causes of personal bankruptcy. Even insured patients face high out of pocket costs, leading to financial ruin. Families often choose between paying medical bills and basic needs like housing or food. Wow, that's crazy. The long term effect creates cycles of poverty, discourages people from seeking care, and erodes trust in the healthcare system. Now, I will say, you know, um, being a black man and actually going to see a healthcare provider, especially one that doesn't look like you, there's a lot of skepticism. There's a lot of skepticism. And the skepticism is that things that are things that they do or things that they use as their research and so forth, it does not include the structure of a person that looks like me or a person that looks like me in general. So these cures and all these other things that they talk about, that's not based on that person being black. Also, we have to worry about our mental health because mental health preventive care goes a long ways. A long ways. And so let me move over here to this next area, which are the challenges. And the challenges are balancing innovation with affordability. The definition of this is policymakers must encourage medical innovation, new drug treatments, and technologies while ensuring those advances remain affordable and accessible. So, what that means is we have to make sure that all those things that we're doing, we're actually we're doing everything that's necessary in order for these situations to apply to every individual, because that's what it should. That's the way it should happen. But it doesn't normally happen that way. It does not normally happen that way. And so when we want to address some of these inequities, you know, there are several things that go into that as well. And one of those things about the inequity is, okay, it ensures healthcare access and quality are equitable across race, income, geography, and social status. The challenge is that for the race, minority communities often face higher rates of chronic illness and lower access to quality care due to systemic inequities. So, in that case, if that's a challenge, then why is it that people that uh, are just minorities in general, and they are facing this kind of situation where there's higher chronic illnesses, but you can't afford health care? Why is that not a problem? Why is that not a problem? See, that's a major policy. That's a major problem that I think if we're going to discuss and debate anything, I think that should be first and foremost, because even with the Affordable Health Care Act, there's still an enormous amount of people that are in communities of the such that don't have health care, because even though it's affordable, they still can't afford it. See, that's just, I don't know, that I just have a problem with that. So all is said and all is done. And what I just want you guys to know is that, I wanted to bring this and a whole lot more to you guys. But what I think I am going to do is I am going to uh, all of this that I have put together. I'm actually going to put this as a document, and I'm going to put this, in a post on my YouTube channels. I'm going to put it as a post on my blog, and get this out so people can have the opportunity to actually go through this and read it. But when you do go through and you read it, I need you to please reach back and tell me, what are you learning from this and where should it go? So, what I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sign off. I'm done. And I'm only wishing for the best for each and every individual out here. And I want you guys to try to get things done as best as possible. And remember, if there's anything here that we can do to assist at America in Black and White, I want you to know that I'm here. So I'm your host, Charles King, and I am signing out. Good night, everyone. You all have a wonderful evening. Please join us tomorrow because we're going to have a financial special tomorrow. We have a panel of three financial professionals that will be here, um, helping you guys to get some understanding as to money, how to use it, especially during these holiday times, giving you guys plenty of tips on things that you can do going forward and how, they could be that person that can help you. I'm your host, Charles King. I want you guys to have a wonderful evening. We will see you tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on American Black and White, where we will continue to color conversations on the canvas of